Hello, my friend. Welcome to the Anti-Aging Hacks podcast. On this episode, we talk about something that I love, intermittent fasting. We talk about why it's so important, how to start it, and how to maintain that fasting lifestyle over time. My guest today is Jen Stephens, who's the author of the New York Times and USA Today bestseller, Fast, Feast, Repeat, published by St. Martin's Press, and Delay, Don't Deny, Living an Intermittent Fasting Lifestyle by an Amazon #1 bestseller in the weight loss category. Jen has been living the intermittent fasting lifestyle since 2014. The lifestyle shift allowed her to lose over 80 pounds and launch her intermittent fasting website, Facebook support groups, 4 self-published books, and 3 top-ranked podcasts. Intermittent Fasting Stories, the Intermittent Fasting Podcast with co-host Melanie Avalon, and the Life Lessons Podcast with co-host Sherry Bullock. Let's get right into it. Hello, everybody, and welcome back to the Anti-Aging Podcast. Today, my guest is a very special one. Her name is Jen Stephens. She is a dynamo. She does a lot, and we're going to get into intermittent fasting and fasting in general, but she's also written a bunch of books. So I can't wait to dive right in. Jen, welcome to the Anti-Aging Hacks podcast.
Well, thank you. I'm so glad to be here. And I love the focus on anti-aging because isn't that what we all want?
That is what we want. And in the new area, the new field of anti-aging and longevity is going to give us some massive dividends, which is just starting up. So you're a wife, Jen, a mother, a retired teacher, and an intermittent faster. That is part of your identity now. Mm-hmm. And you have a really interesting weight loss story. Please tell the audience why they should listen to you in terms of fasting and weight loss.
Well, thank you. Yes, I, like probably a lot of listeners, I struggled with my weight for years and was stuck on that yo-yo or the roller coaster of ups and downs. And, you know, it really just, I started struggling in college. Like a lot of people, I gained the freshman 15 and went on my first diet and the rest was history. You know, I would gain some weight, lose the weight, gain a little more, lose a little more. And it wasn't really until I had kids in my late 20s, early 30s that I really started to struggle a little bit more after the kids. And then my highs were higher, my lows were lower. Finally, in 2014, we went on a family trip and I was officially obese. Like I looked at myself in the photos and was like, oh no, who is that? First of all, I didn't recognize myself. You know, moving around was hard on the trip. And then I got on the scale and I weighed 210 pounds. Wow. And so, like I said, at 5'5", I was officially obese. And that was the time, this was, like I said, 2014. And I said, this is it. This is the last time I'm going to do this. Of course, I'd said that many times before and it had never been true. But fortunately, that was the last time. I went on to lose over 80 pounds, hit my initial goal weight, which was 75 pounds down. I hit that in 2015, went on to lose a little bit more thanks to intermittent fasting. Mm-hmm. And I have been maintaining ever since, 2015 within the same weight range. I got a little bit leaner over the couple of years after I hit my goal, like I said, but, I'm 51 now. I'm on the other side of menopause. Mm-hmm. I've gone through menopause, gone through the pandemic, all of this, and continue to maintain my weight, which is just astonishing. I knew intermittent fasting was amazing, but when I started to go through menopause, I thought, well, is this going to be the thing, because most women gain weight and I didn't. So I feel like if I can get to the other side of menopause and get through a pandemic and still maintain, intermittent fasting is the real deal.
There we go. And by the way, if I may, Jen, you look great for 51.
Thank you.
Your skin looks great. And like I said to you before, your energy looks awesome. So you're doing something right. And I can't wait to uncover or discover what you're doing. And
well, spoiler alert, it's intermittent fasting.
Okay. Okay. I'm sure there's some more things going on there, but yes. We'll talk about that as well. Now, what I really respect about what you've done is you've maintained that weight loss, right? A lot of people go back, they do yo-yo, but you've maintained the weight loss. And you're also the author, a prolific author, if I may. You've written many books, the latest one called Fast, Feast, Repeat, the comprehensive guide to delay, don't deny intermittent fasting. So, and you have multiple books on intermittent fasting. So I think it's safe to say that you're obsessed with this.
Well, I didn't set out to be obsessed with intermittent fasting. I tried so many things over the years. I really tried everything. Anything that came out prior to 2014, I tried it. And, intermittent fasting, I heard about it for the first time really in around 2009. And I immediately was like, this is going to be my answer. But for many reasons, which I talk about in my latest book, Fast, Feast, Repeat, which is a New York Times bestseller, by the way, and
Amazing.
very exciting.
Congratulations.
Yes. Thank you. But, I talk about all the reasons why intermittent fasting didn't work for me between 2009 and 2014. Basically, I didn't see it as a lifestyle. I didn't understand, what the fast really did. Why is it different from calorie restriction? So many things. And I just had that dieter's mindset. It wasn't until I lost the dieter's mindset and understood fasting better that I was finally able to not only lose the weight, but then embrace it as a lifestyle. But I wrote my first book in 2016. And so it's been, we're right at the 4-year anniversary of when that book came out, because it came out on December 31st of 2016. It was finally available for purchase. But the reason that I wrote that first book was because I had a couple of, now I know they are small intermittent fasting support groups, because at the time we had, like 3,000 something members in one group and, 1,000 in the other. And they felt so big to me. But I was like, people kept asking, how do I get started? What do I do? And so I was like, well, there really isn't a book out that tells you what to do. Keep in mind, this was 2016. So I said, well, I'm going to put a book together that is written, in a short way that you would hand to a friend and your friend could read it quickly. And it would be like having coffee with your friend, Jen, who understands intermittent fasting, and just telling you about how to get started. And then you can get started too. So I wrote that book, Delay, Don't Deny, Living an Intermittent Fasting Lifestyle. And I self-published it and popped it up there on Amazon and through all the ebook retailers. And I was like, all right, let's see what happens. I didn't know who would read it or if anyone would read it. And it actually has done very, very well. It's been a #1 bestseller on the Amazon in the weight loss category. And it's been in the top 30 of the weight loss category, really pretty much ever since. That's also very exciting.
Yeah.
And so I wrote another book, Feast Without Fear, in 2017, because, diet wars, people are always talking about this is the best way to eat. No, the opposite is the best way to eat. And so I felt like, there had to be something behind, why can we not agree on what's the best way to eat? Well, spoiler alert on that as well. We're all different when it comes to what foods work for our bodies. And the science is really letting us know that. The more we learn about the science of food and nutrition in our bodies, the more we realize how we're all very, very individual. And then I have a couple of, like a journal and a book study book. But then I was very fortunate to team up with St. Martin's Press, which is a division of Macmillan. And so Fast, Feast, Repeat is traditionally published, which is very exciting. And I've got some other things in the works.
Great. You're very prolific, if I may say so. You've got
thank you.
3 podcasts. One you just started a few days ago. And you've written multiple books. You're active in your Facebook groups. Thank you for providing such value to the world. Now, let me ask you this. In terms of intermittent fasting, I'm so glad that it's finally the world is loving something that doesn't require you to go buy something or eat something or stuff yourself in some way, right? It's like we're going back to the basics, if you will, ancestral techniques where we had to fast because there was no food out there.
Right.
And so just let's define what intermittent fasting means for you, Jen, because now that the term is becoming popular, there's people that are saying, well, it really means eating in a certain window. Some people are saying, well, alternate day fasting is also intermittent fasting. Some people say two-day fasting is also intermittent fasting. So in the world you come from or how you define it, how would you describe it in the coffee book, if you will, to somebody listening?
That's a great question. And some people do, say, well, that's not intermittent fasting and this is not intermittent fasting. But really, the cat's out of the bag, the cow's out of the barn. We have the terminology intermittent fasting, and love it or hate it, it really is an umbrella term for whenever you purposefully have periods of time where you're not eating, and then you have periods of time where you are eating. It's really just as simple as that. If the protocol that you're using requires that you stop eating for a period of time and then you eat, it falls under that intermittent fasting umbrella. So within the intermittent fasting world, we have time restricted eating, which is also known as the eating window approach. And, that's one a lot of people have heard of. 16-8 is one method that is very talked about. And that would be 16 hours of the day you're fasting, 8 hours would be your eating window. You could do anything from that up to 23-1, and you have a 1 hour eating window in a day, which sounds extreme until you start doing intermittent fasting. And then you realize, wow, an hour a day could really be enough food for a day here and there. So those are the time restricted eating or eating window approach. Then we also have various, I call them up and down day protocols or alternate day fasting protocols. Basically, those involve longer fasts of 36 to 42 hours. That would be your down day or the fasting day. So you wake up in the morning, you haven't eaten, and you fast all day, and then you go to sleep and you're still fasted. Then the next day you wake up and you have your up day where you can eat however you prefer, at least 2 meals. 3 is also fine. The true alternate daily fasting is just like that. It would be like 36-12, 36 hours of fasting, 12 hours of eating. And then you would just repeat that. But there have been other protocols that kind of spun out of that. The earliest research on those protocols were done by Dr. Krista Verde. And then they became very popular when Dr. Michael Mosley came out with a documentary about 5-2. You've heard of 5-2.
Yeah.
That would be 2 of those days per week, or 2 full fasts, followed by, quote, eating normally the other days. Now, a lot of the research Krista Verity did with the alternate daily fasting, instead of it being a complete 36 to 42 hour fast, they actually had 500 calories on the fast day. Mm-hmm. So think about it like you would fast all day, have one 500 calorie meal, have a second fast, and then the next day is your up day. So
Got it. Okay.
Those are all different approaches. And in Fast Feast Repeat, I even talk about, a hybrid approach where you kind of blend them together. You might decide to have 2 down days of the full fast or the 500 calorie meal. Each one of those needs to be followed by an up day where you have at least 2 meals, 3 is fine. Mm-hmm. And then that would leave you with, other days where you could choose to have an eating window. There's just really so many ways you can tweak this to feel right for you. And what feels right during one season you might need to change it up for another.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
A lot of flexibility.
Yeah. I love that. There's obviously different people cater to different styles. Mm-hmm. Something attracts them more than others. For me, and I think for a lot of people, it's just easy not to eat for 16 hours. And then you can eat, have 2 meals or 1 meal if you want, if you just want to stuff yourself for an hour. But it just saves you so much time. Like when you wake up in the morning, not having to worry about breakfast, my goodness, it's like you can just start working and start getting focused immediately. Now, there's also people that talk about maybe aligning with the circadian rhythm and then trying to do the fast when it's dark outside. So eating when it's light outside and then doing the fast when it's dark outside, like we would in the caveman days where we couldn't go out and hunt at night. But I also understand and recognize that it's hard to do that because night times are when people or families get together. You can make better meals, you can sit down, you can have a conversation, and maybe just that camaraderie and conversation overrides, just following what our ancestors would have done a couple 100 years ago. Do you have a perspective on what windows you recommend people eat?
The whole idea of circadian rhythm fasting and that there's like one set circadian rhythm way to fast is so interesting. And it's based on, a lot of theory. And, I could talk about, the insulin sensitivity and why they theorize it's better to eat earlier. But the whole idea that we have the same circadian rhythm is, from person to person is just so interesting. Of course we don't. People who are early to bed, early to rise. I'm one of those people. I wake up really early in the morning and I'm ready to go to bed early too. Whereas, I've got some really good friends that are the complete opposite. They like to sleep in. They feel better staying up late. So their sleep wake time is shifted. And so, just like the way we want to be awake at different times, the way some of us are late sleepers, some of us wake up with the sun. We're not all the same when it comes to when we're going to feel best eating. There are people who feel best when they have an early in the day eating window. I am not one of those people. I feel better when my eating window is open sometimes at this point in my life, right now in this season of my life. I'm retired from school teaching. And so I work from home with my podcasts and my writing and my Facebook groups. I prefer to open my window late afternoon, and I'm usually finished by about 7 p.m. Of course, it's winter here, so it's dark by 7 p.m. So I'm still eating a little bit after dark, but that's what time feels right for me right now. The thing is, the whole theory that there's a time that's best, we don't have any research studies that compare early time restricted eating to late time restricted eating with all other variables being equal. There's a study people love to use as the evidence for why early is better. And it was a study on early time restricted eating. And they compared an early time restricted eating group to people who ate all day. Mm-hmm. So guess which group did better? The early time restricted eating group had better health markers than the people who ate all day. But that doesn't surprise anyone who knows about the benefits of fasting. What we need would be a long-term study where the only thing that's different is the time of day of the eating window. Keep the variables consistent between the groups, because you really can't make any, you can't draw any conclusions when you have so many variables. Mm-hmm. Yes, early time restricted eating was a great approach for the people who did it. It was better than eating all day. But we can't say, oh, that means that early is the time everyone should eat. Yeah. You can't draw that conclusion from that study, but people do.
That's fair. So let me ask you, or maybe let me take a step back for the folks that are listening to this show that might not be all in with fasting or not know the benefits. Obviously, you restrict how much food you put in your body. That helps you reduce the number of calories. I think anybody knows that. But there's also a lot of other benefits, regenerative benefits in the body with fasting. Jen, can you just quickly run through some of the benefits that you love about fasting?
Absolutely. As I said, when I first started, we didn't really understand, the people who were dabbling around in it. We just thought it was a way to eat fewer calories. And now we realize there are a lot of hormonal and metabolic things that go on when you're fasting that don't happen when you're following a typical low-calorie diet where you're eating multiple meals. First of all, one thing that fasting does for us is it gets us in a state of really low insulin. When you're in the fasted state, your insulin goes down because you're not eating. And, so many of the diseases that we're facing today are diseases of high insulin. Mm-hmm. I didn't even realize how many until I was writing Fast, Feast, Repeat. And I came across a journal article from a medical journal that was all about hyperinsulinemia. And that was the first time I'd ever seen how many things are connected to having chronic high levels of insulin. We tend to think of course, we know about diabetes, type 1, type 2 diabetes when we hear about insulin, but high levels of insulin are also connected to Alzheimer's, for example, an inflammatory condition, metabolic syndrome, a lot of autoimmune conditions, PCOS that so many women are plagued with now that we didn't used to hear about. And now it's like so many people have it. And one thing they all have in common is chronic high levels of insulin. So we need to get our insulin down. A lot of people turn to low carb or ketogenic diet to do that, but fasting actually gets your insulin down even better because you're not eating, you're fasting, so that your body doesn't have any reason to keep pumping out the insulin all day. And so then, you can reverse your insulin resistance. When you have low levels of insulin, you're able to tap into your fat stores for fuel. You actually do get into ketosis, even though your eating window, doesn't have to be low carb or keto. I am not low carb or keto by any means. I'm actually high carb. I eat lots of carbs, and carbs do not mean junk food. I eat a lot of beans. I mill my own wheat from whole grain, that sort of thing. Oh, wow. And I do really well with real food carbs. Mm-hmm. But I get into ketosis during the fast every day, and my insulin levels are low. I've actually had a fasting blood test within the past year, and it was nice and low, my insulin levels. And so, it's just a very healthy way to live for so many reasons. Also, I know you like to talk about anti-aging. I actually consider intermittent fasting to be the fountain of youth because it does many things in our bodies. First of all, it upregulates levels of human growth hormone when you're fasting. And so that helps you to build muscle. Also, there's some talk and some research about increased bone density for people who are doing intermittent fasting with the higher levels of human growth hormone. Mm-hmm. Also, we have something going on during the fast called autophagy. And I'm sure you've heard of autophagy. Yeah. And autophagy is our body's cellular housekeeping system. And so when we start, when we're aging and the autophagy processes get kind of slowed down, then we really experience the cellular aging. But when we're doing intermittent fasting and our bodies have increased autophagy during our daily fast, it cleans up all that junk. And so, our bodies are meant to have periods of the day for rest, recovery, cleaning things up. We're not designed to eat from the minute we wake up till the minute we go to bed. That's just a modern construct. You talked about ancestral eating. People did not eat around the clock and snack and all of that. This is a new modern thing, and it hasn't worked out well for us.
No. This in terms of the overall health of the entire society is going down.
Right.
Those are great points, Jen. I practice a lot of fasting myself. I do intermittent every day for about 16, 20 hours of fasting.
Mm-hmm. And
then I've started doing a 24-hour fast, every 1 or 2 weeks. And then a couple of times a year, I like to do a 5-day fast. And that could be a Vault or Longo-ish, like the fasting mimicking diet type of fast. Or it could just be like nothing, just straight black coffee. Mm-hmm. For 5 days. And I've noticed that after day three is by far the hardest for me because your body's like, just give me food. And on day 4, it's like, oh, I guess I'm good to go now. And you just get this energy and you want to go work out for some reason. But obviously that's a longer fast. And so in terms of, what it's doing to our body, thank you for recapping those. There's also this word that a lot of folks are using, and I'm glad they call it metabolic flexibility.
Oh yeah.
And so I'd love for you to touch on what that means to you and why that's so important.
I think it is our default metabolic state. It's how we're meant to be. We're meant to be metabolically flexible. What that means is, our body can run on a variety of fuel sources. You can run on the glucose from the frequent meals. And that's what most people are doing. Most adult humans at this point in time are just pretty much, sugar burners. They're running on the food that they're taking in. Our bodies, it's either glucose or converted to glucose. We're using the glucose. And then, we store the excess away and we keep putting more fuel in. And most people are therefore not metabolically flexible. I certainly wasn't when I weighed 210 pounds. I would get up, I would eat breakfast. Then a couple hours later, I'd be starving. And because I had high insulin levels all the time, high levels of insulin keep your body from tapping into your fat stores. Insulin is anti-lipolytic. So you have all this fuel on your body. I was obese. I was packed full of fuel and I couldn't really access it. So I was starving when my blood sugar would go down, after, a couple hours after I ate. And then I was starving. And so I had to put more fuel in. I was not metabolically flexible. But once you are, your body regains the ability to tap into stored fat for fuel. And so your body can shift fuel sources as needed. When I'm fasted, my liver can create ketones for my brain to run on and I feel great. When I eat, my body can switch fuel sources there. So that's the metabolic flexibility that we're meant to have. You're not meant to, have to have food in your pocket or in your purse or with you at all times. Right. You're meant to be able to be fine, without it. And so intermittent fasting lets you regain that metabolic flexibility and you realize hunger is not an emergency. You have plenty of fuel on your body to get you where you need to be. And it's just such a freeing way to live.
I agree 100%. I think I was really reminded of this, struck by this a few years ago when I tried the ketogenic diet for the first time. And when you do it for the first time, it takes a couple of weeks for your body to be like, okay, I guess I have fat. I could just burn that. And once you're in it, what I remember vividly from that diet or the lifestyle was that I did not feel hungry. I would eat something at noon and then at 8 p.m. I would think to myself, it's almost time to go to bed. Maybe I should eat something before I sleep. Not because I needed to or had to. Maybe I should because I need, the fuel for the night. So it really shifted everything for me. And now I could go 10, 20, 30 hours and not really feel hunger pangs like I used to when I was burning sugar. It was terrible. You'd get hangry. I don't think I've gotten hangry in many years, thankfully. Let's touch on this, Jen. Again, different folks say different things in terms of what you can eat in your fasted window. Some people do bulletproof coffee, which means they put a bunch of fat in their coffee and that sustains them. Some people do bone broth now. But in terms of the way you think about fasting and intermittent fasting, what's allowed and how many calories is allowed in the fasted window?
Well, that's a great question. And, I have actually 2 chapters on this in Fast, Feast, Repeat. And the reason, that I have what I call the clean fast has to do with our 3 fasting goals. So let's think about our 3 fasting goals. And when you understand why we're fasting, then you understand what you should or shouldn't have. So our first fasting goal is to keep insulin low. And so what would make our body release insulin? Well, food. So of course we don't eat. So don't eat any food. And also food flavors, especially sweet flavors or fruity flavors, anything that your brain is going to think, oh, I'm about to have a load of glucose coming in, because that's the way the brain works. It's called cephalic phase insulin response. And just as soon as you taste the sweetness, like let's say you're having a diet soda, right? That sounds perfect for fasting because it's 0 calories, right? No food. Well, you drink this diet soda, your brain perceives the sweetness and says, oop, pancreas, we got some sweet calories coming in, pump out some insulin. And so your pancreas pumps out some insulin in response to calories that never come in. And so, but now your insulin's high and it's going to drop your blood glucose and you're going to be hangry. It's also going to keep you from really tapping into those fat stores. So, the same thing if you're drinking like water with lemon, anything that's going to make your brain think that food is coming in. So avoid, those sweet herbal teas. I used to like one called, apple cinnamon blend or whatever. I don't drink that anymore during the fast. I stick to plain water, plain sparkling water, also black coffee, plain tea. Those have a bitter flavor profile, and a bitter flavor profile is not associated with cephalic phase insulin response. So that's why most people think that black coffee and bitter tea would be okay during the fast. So that's fasting goal 1, keep your insulin low. Fasting goal 2, we want to tap into our stored fat for fuel, right? How do you do that? By not taking in other sources of fat. So if you're drinking, a big old mug of butter coffee or MCT oil or bulletproof coffee or cream in your coffee or whatever you want to call it, your body's going to use that for fuel. And of course, it's going to make you feel full because you're eating. It's food. Just because you're drinking it, you're not chewing it, but it's still food for your body. It's an energy source. It's a lot of energy. I hear from a lot of people because my fasting groups have almost 500,000 members now combined worldwide. And there are so many people that talk about how they started off and they were drinking the bulletproof coffee and that they were they would drink it and then it would be okay for a while. And then they're starving and then they would have another one and then they were starving, but they never lost any weight. And that's why if you just fast clean without it, your body is getting fuel in a steady way from your own body. So that we want to get our own, we want to tap into our own fat stores. So fasting goal 3 is that we want to have increased autophagy. And what shuts off autophagy? Well, protein shuts off autophagy. So you don't want to drink bone broth because bone broth is full of protein. So we want to stick to those things that are going to keep our insulin low, the water, the black coffee, the plain tea, unflavored sparkling water. That would be fine. We don't want to add another fuel source or fats. We want to tap into our fat stores and we don't want to ingest protein. We want to make sure that autophagy is upregulated. It's so much more than just, like I said, calories in, calories out. We have so much more going on in our bodies that we want to promote. So I really think that fasting clean is the key to not being hangry, to seeing the results you're looking for a long time, and to getting the benefits that we're looking for. So when you understand what your goals are, it becomes very easy to stick to plain water, black coffee with nothing added.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more, actually. If your goal is to fast and get the benefits of fasting, then fast.
Right.
Then don't be mixing all kinds of things in your food and flavors and saying, I'm on a juice cleanse for 4 days. I'm on a juice fast. Like that's
a low calorie diet.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly. And I'm completely against juice fasts because you're getting all the sugar of the fruit without the fiber, which
correct.
You're just shooting yourself in the foot. But regardless, when people come to me and say, what should I do? The first thing I tell them is, can you just stop eating between meals? Can you just fast between your meals? Because we're not even fasting between meals. We're like you said, there's something in the purse, there's something in the back pocket, there's a Kit Kat. People are just eating all the time. So
all the time. Yeah.
Yeah. So that's a micro habit that they could form. But then of course, it's extending this fasting window, starting maybe, have your breakfast at 8 or 9 or whatever time you do. And then just over a few days, extend that back an hour, an hour, an hour. And then before you know it, it's 2 p.m. and you haven't felt hungry. In terms of, when you work with people, Jen, or at least in the Facebook groups, there's obviously people coming into this world of fasting. And I believe there might be some patterns that work better than others. If you tell them you shouldn't fast for a day, people might freak out. But if you say move it back an hour or two, they're like, oh yeah, I could do that. So in terms of what works for newcomers in your groups, what are some patterns that you've noticed?
I've got actually something in Fast, Feast, Repeat called the 28-day fast start. Mm-hmm. And in the fast start, there's a quiz that you can take if you want, or you can just pick which plan you want. But there are 3 different plans. One of them really eases you in, and it lets you, train your body to be fat adapted by first, going low carb for breakfast and lunch with having a normal dinner, whatever that looks like to you. And so you're teaching your body to use fat for fuel, and you're lowering your carb intake just for those first 2 meals of the day. Then eventually you drop that low carb breakfast. Now you're having low carb lunch and a regular dinner. And then eventually, you're able to teach your body to fast by easing yourself in. So that's the easiest approach. But then on the opposite end of the spectrum, I have what I call the rip off the Band-Aid approach, which really a lot of people like to do. They don't want to draw it out. They're like, I'm just going to skip breakfast. I'm going to skip lunch now. And nice. They're ready to jump right in, and the adjustment might be more harsh, but it's shorter. So it just depends. You have to, and there's also a plan in the middle for someone who wants to, kind of, you don't want to do it really slowly, but you don't want to rip off the Band-Aid either. And at any time you can go up or down. You can, ease up a little bit, or you can, be a little more aggressive with your approach. The whole thing is understanding that your body has to adjust and adapt. And there's no failing at first, because you're learning to listen to your body. Your body is not going to be skilled at tapping into your fat stores for fuel. And it's learning how to do a new thing. The older you are, the longer you've been overweight. If you are someone who's overweight, the longer you've struggled with that, the longer you've been insulin resistant, or if you're obese, it's going to take you longer than it takes someone who's really metabolically healthy. So just understanding what your body is doing, understanding scientifically that it's a process, and being patient as you go along. And also understanding that intermittent fasting is a lifestyle. You're trying to build up that fasting muscle, if you will, so that it becomes second nature. And then that's just your default way of living your life. And going back to having a day where you eat all day becomes what's abnormal. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I love that it's a lifestyle. You've got to slowly just live this new lifestyle. And the more support that you can get from your family and or online folks, the better. And yes, maybe your family may not support you, but that's the reason why you have Facebook groups and online communities where you get reinforcement, and you see everybody else doing it. So you say, I can do it too. In terms of, what diet and nutrition in the feeding windows when people can actually eat, Jen, are there recommendations that you have in terms of a dietary pattern or lifestyle, or even specific diets?
Well, I'm a big believer, as I said, when I did my research for Feast Without Fear in 2017. Have you followed Dr. Aaron Segal's work? He has a great YouTube video called What is the Best Diet for Humans? And when I saw that, it really, and it was back in 2017 when I saw it. He's from Israel. And so they're doing research on personalized nutrition. Basically, their research showed that people have a personalized glucose response to foods. And so the whole glycemic index is based on averages. And so what you respond to and what I respond to could be completely different things. And that just blew my mind, because we're so used to reading books that say you must be low fat, or you must be low carb, or everyone should be this. And, I have no doubt that the author of that diet book felt great following that plan. It was probably the plan that worked really well for their personal biology. And then they assumed it would be also the same for everyone else. But don't we know that's not true? You have a friend who did well with keto, whereas you felt terrible on keto, or you had a friend that did well with the low fat diets, whereas that didn't work for you. There's biology to show why that is. I wrote about it in Fast, Feast, Repeat, the Predict 1 and the Predict 2 study, following on Dr. Segal's group's research. Dr. Tim Spector, who lives in England, he's been doing a lot of work with identical twins over the years, also a lot with your gut microbiome. So they're putting all this together. And I actually participated in the Predict 3 study with their Zoe app, it's called. And so you have certain foods you're supposed to eat, and you wear a CGM, a continuous glucose monitor, and it measures your response to these challenge meals that they send you, some that are high fat, some that are high sugar. They see what happens. You take your blood sample. They see how quickly you clear the fat. Mm-hmm. I have really slow, really poor fat clearance, which explains why when I tried to do keto, I felt terrible. I felt huge levels of inflammation. I felt awful the whole time I tried to do keto.
Gotcha.
And now that I have the science to show that my body clears fat slowly, makes a lot of sense why that didn't work for me. Mm-hmm. So to make a long story short, no, there is not one best way to eat. It's based on how your body responds to the different things. I do believe, if I had to say what's ideal, real food, obviously, real food is ideal. But, what that real food is made of is going to be so vastly different from person to person. Really listen to your body and trust the way you feel. Like I have always known, what foods don't make me feel good and what foods I'm okay eating. And so my body really does know. And so the results from this Predict 3 study kind of matched what I knew, but now I have the science of it. So if someone wants to eat real food, that's the best way, but then really listen to your body and see how you feel. Somebody, may not do well with a lot of carbs and they know they feel better when they have a lower carb approach. Trust your body. It's telling you that. Or maybe you know that if you eat too much fat, you don't feel well. Trust your body. It's telling you that.
Yeah, agreed. There's 2 nuggets you dropped in there. One was that not every diet's for everybody, so we're individual. Right. Completely agree. And then 2 is listen to your body, because it's going to tell you what's going on. If you just take a second, get off the social media apps, get off your computer, and just listen to your body. In terms of what I've been doing more and more is that going back to my ancestral patterns is that, if your ancestors ate more carbs, then you're more likely to be more tolerant of carbs as opposed to wheat or gluten or all these irritants that now, there's 100 diets that tell you to avoid everything. But in my opinion, you can err on the side of what your ancestors ate because probably your biology is better flexed or adapted to that. But even having said that, there is now personalized nutrition coming out. And this is an exciting new world where, yes, listen to your body, but now these tests will tell you what you're irritated by or allergic to. And that's going to be a whole new paradigm that's going to open up. And then we're going to match that with our genetics and the epigenetics. Yeah. So it's going to be amazing. And then last point to your CGM or continuous glucose monitor. I've worn it a few times, and I love what it tells you, because you could sleep all day. In the morning you wake up and you say, oh, I was at 75. That's really cool. And when you go eat a big burrito or 3 slices of pizza, it tells you exactly how badly you're doing. So you get a check and you start to shift your habits because now you can see what's actually going on. Okay.
Well, it's fascinating. Dr. Tim Spector, who was doing the work for this Predict 2 and Predict 3 studies, he has found that some of it is your genetics, but more of it is your gut microbiome than they even realized. Your genetics play a role, but it's all important, and they put that all together, and it's such great information to have. And you can change your gut microbiome, by the way.
Right. That's the exciting part. And eating different types of foods changes it pretty quickly is what the science is suggesting, the new science. Okay, awesome. In terms of, I guess, one last question on that, Jen. I've heard conflicting points of view on women fasting for more than 12 hours. Some experts say the hormones are totally fine. There's no difference. Just do it as men would. And some experts say, no, the cycles are different. Therefore, you should be more careful. Your perspective on women fasting for, 23 hours a day.
Here's the thing. we know that women's bodies are very sensitive to over restriction.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Now I want to make this point really clear. Over restriction is a problem for women, especially for fertility. So think about women that have done hardcore low calorie diets and over restriction with the foods they're eating and done lots and lots of working out. They'll lose their periods. That's not good. But you could do the same with fasting. You could have a fasting lifestyle where you're also over restricting in your eating window. That is not a good thing. But also over restriction isn't good for men's bodies either. The research we have on what happens when we over restrict for our bodies, we know that it hurts us metabolically, it hurts us hormonally in so many ways, women and men. So no one should be living an overly restrictive lifestyle. But intermittent fasting is not overly restrictive when you fast, feast, repeat. You're fasting for a period of time that feels good for you. Then you have an eating window where you eat to satiety and you choose nutritious foods. You fuel your body well. You give your body good nutrition. Your body doesn't have the signal that you're overly restricting because you're not. So I think that's the key. Now, different women are going to have different amounts of fasting that will possibly feel overly restricted to them. And it may also depend on, how you like to eat. I am a big meal eater. I like to eat, a lot of food and feel really satisfied. I'm not one of those eats like a bird kind of girls, If I was one of those eat like a bird kind of girls, maybe a 5-hour eating window would be too short for my body. Maybe it would be overly restrictive, but it's not, because I can put away a good amount of food in a 5-hour eating window. So it's not overly restrictive for me. But so I think that's the key. You want to have an eating window that is not overly restrictive for you, depending on, the way that you like to eat within your eating window. And I can't tell you what that is, but I will say that we've got hundreds of thousands of group members and 90% of my groups are women, and we're doing really, really well. And so, I cannot say that it's something that's not good for women, because I know way too many women that it's great for. I actually interviewed Dr. Cecily Ganhart on my Intermittent Fasting Stories podcast. I guess it was in 2018. And she's an OBGYN who also is known as the fasting doctor. And she treats women who have PCOS. And guess what she does for them? She has them fast. And so it actually increases their fertility, because PCOS is related to high levels of insulin. So when they adopt an intermittent fasting lifestyle, these women that were having a really hard time getting pregnant lower their levels of insulin. Suddenly they're more fertile. So, a lot of the people who are saying women shouldn't fast tend to be men. I don't know.
It's not this man.
Good.
But that's great to hear. I'm going to look her up and have her on my show as well.
She's awesome. Yeah.
And if not, I'll ask you to introduce me. I'll ask one more question.
Okay.
Why are 90% of the folks in your group women, Jen? Like, are men not interested in fasting?
We got tons of men fasting. I just don't think they use Facebook groups as much as women do.
Okay, fair enough.
Honestly, like my husband, the way he uses Facebook versus the way I use Facebook, it's just different. I'm not generalizing or stereotyping women and men, but we tend to. Just think about, you go back to ancestral. The women are gathered around the home and the hearth,
Yes.
and the men are out hunting. So we have a lot of men who are doing intermittent fasting. We have some very engaged and wonderful men in our Facebook groups as well. So I don't want to say that we don't, but it just tends to be, a female platform, I guess, in so many ways. A lot of women are in the groups, but their husbands also do intermittent fasting.
There we go.
Yeah.
Happy wife, happy life.
That's true.
I really, really appreciate this topic. Thank you for doing this. Thank you for writing the books. This is one of the most important health paradigms that we have to shift our mind towards, is that we shouldn't be eating all the time. And fasting has a lot more benefits just beyond caloric restriction,
Right.
beyond a thinner, healthier body, as Jen mentioned earlier, but it also has regenerative properties, anti-aging properties. And so everybody should be fasting within their limits. And so, Jen, having said that, where can people find you? How can they join your Facebook groups and be part of the movement?
Well, if you go to jenstephens.com, and Jen is Gin, like gin and tonic, and Stephens is with a PH, jenstephens.com. There are links to my Facebook community, links to my podcasts. Look for Delay Don't Deny Intermittent Fasting Support on Facebook. We have an advanced group. It's called Delay Don't Deny Advanced Book Support Group. And it's for people who have read Fast, Feast, Repeat. So once you've read Fast, Feast, Repeat, you can join the Delay Don't Deny Advanced Book Group. And we will support you there and answer your fasting questions. And you'll see that you are not alone. There are lots of us living this way and never planning to go back.
That's great. Well, thanks again, Jen, for spreading this very important message.
Glad to do it. Thank you for having me.